Hello, friends. Welcome to the Confidence Zone. It is the third Friday of the month, and I am here for my monthly conversation with the chronic conditions chaplain, Evie Lennon, to speak with you about getting real, about conversation about chronic conditions. Hello, Evie. How are you today?
I'm terrific. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm intrigued. I'm feeling, very curious because the conversation that we're going to have today is so vitally important. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for, showing up to have these free, live, valuable conversations because I've learned mostly from you, from reading your book and from our many conversations and from our live conversations about how it feels to have chronic conditions. One of the things that I've learned from you, Evie, is reverence for having chronic conditions. And the last thing I want to say before I let you go is this. I thought before I read your book and before we started our conversations that other people had chronic conditions like physical ailments, illnesses, diseases, chronic pain, those kinds of things. But I've learned that really most of us have some kind of chronic condition or other, especially today, because I've learned that mental health creates chronic conditions,
Mhm.
worry, anxiety, depression. And I think I want to say that most of us don't have a lot of reverence for that. So, what are your thoughts about this?
I originally started to write my book about chronic conditions about the workplace because I think it's one of many places that we are chronically challenged. So I do think we're all on a continuum because what we have in common is that we live in structures, whether that's family, work, friendships, there's expectations. We all have an idea of how we're supposed to perform, and usually there's some kind of barrier that's persistent. And one thing that struck me as you were talking is that as the demand upon workers is at an all-time high to be respectful of diversity, including mental and physical health,
Mm.
they have never been more, or I will say, we have never been more limited in how we can respond because so many things are automated. So,
Talk about this. What do you mean when you say this?
um,
You said we
on
have never been more limited about how we can respond because so many things are automated.
I think it's technology. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I had a lovely conversation with a woman named Ashley who works for T-Mobile. Since my mom had a stroke, she's no longer able to use her cell phone. And so I wanted to cancel it for her. She's had this phone for 20 years.
Mhm.
And so when the lady said, "What's your PIN number?" she didn't know what a PIN number was.
Yeah.
And there was also a discrepancy on her bill of 140. I helped her with her bill, so I knew that they weren't giving her credit for a bill she had paid, and she was unable to cancel her account. So the bills kept rolling in. They kept saying, "You need your PIN number."
Wow.
And they said, "We'll text you." The alternative is, "We will text you a code." And she said, "But I don't text." And they said, "Well, that's okay. You can go to the store." And she said, "I'm 85. I can't go to the store." So I talked to a lovely person, the fifth or sixth person I talked to, had a lot of empathy for our situation. And she wanted to ask her supervisor if she couldn't please just ask my mom for her social security number. And they said no. And I said, I'm actually a disability advocate. And this is highly frustrating for a lot of your older and disabled clients who you are, and this is the position I think you're talking about that we're all in, where you're
Mm.
being asked to do something that is really a stretch for you. that was true for the worker who was trying to help us. So she's put in a position where she's expected to provide customer service, expected to be uh, conscientious about everything without the power to respond.
Hold on, stop 1 second. This is too much for me to take in, honestly. This is too much. This is why we're having this monthly conversation,
Mm-hmm.
Evie, why you and I are showing up and doing this. There's
Mm-hmm.
no compensation except to really feel the compensation of serving the souls who need to be hearing this. So let me just say a few things here. So mom, 85, has some chronic conditions, including, not being able to access, information online from maybe lack of memory, lack of ability, normal aging conditions. That is a form of chronic condition. I watched this happen to my mother many times. And then she feels worse and worse, or more likely, she's getting madder and madder, right?
Very
And
much, yeah.
that's rage. That affects us. You're advocating for her. You're getting more and more upset. You're seeing bills come in because of the automated, systems that we're in these days. And now you're working with somebody who actually has a different kind of condition, which is that, but she is in chronically,
Mm-hmm.
which is that she might want to help. She does want to help. That person might want to be helpful, but is not empowered to do that. So I really want our listeners to understand there's a lot going on here. This is not just about dealing with a chronic illness, but we've talked about that in the past. We'll talk about that in the future. But also, I want to get back to the idea that you are helping me to understand, which is having reverence for this.
Yes, and for the worker at T-Mobile who is continuously being put in a position where she is asking people to do what they cannot do. And so, but yet she's expected to retain customers. So that will probably work against her stats. Oh, we lost another customer. But, she did do something extraordinary where she reached out to leadership and said, this is something that our leadership team needs to look at as a big company who serves an entire nation or possibly nations. Um, all of the employees are put in this position, and not just this company, but most companies, whether it's a parking garage at a hospital where they can't let someone out, it doesn't even have to be dealing with chronic illnesses, but people are
This,
secure.
this, yes. Honestly, I have someone I'm not going to say it, but I have someone very close to me who is in a call center type position, customer service, just like you're talking about. And this person deals with this every day. And this person is suffering. I'm not going to be melodramatic about it, but I am saying I don't think it's too melodramatic to say it is a chronic situation that you just described. And there are mental and emotional outcomes and spiraling down from being in these chronic situations. So these are called chronic situations.
Yes.
Evie, the chronic conditions chaplain, are chronic situations akin to chronic conditions?
Absolutely, because we base our self-esteem on what we can do. And if there is something that's in the way of that, whether that's a policy or a physical limitation, it is a physical limitation at work when you cannot, you know, adjust the computer to accommodate an emergency situation. Um, or maybe it's not an emergency, but there's plenty of situations. A person's working for a utility company and somebody's about to get their electricity turned off, but they may not be able to get the documentation they need. That person is chronically stressed and they are feeling bad about themselves. They are feeling every single day that they're creating pain, that they're failing at their job. And often, and this is maybe a stretch, but there's a wonderful book called The Sociopath Next Door, and it talks about how people, a lot of times, in those positions of power that are the supervisors of the people who have empathy but are limited, a lot of times they have risen because of their ability to be okay with the rigidity, which is saving the company profit.
Interesting. So I just want you to know, I don't know if you can hear it, but I keep looking away because I'm typing real notes into our real live comments. So we have several people. If anybody listening wants to make any comments, I can see them. So please feel free to ask a question or make a comment. But in the meantime, I'm writing down, I just wrote down the book, The Sociopath Next Door. I wrote, Evie, Lennon says we base our self-esteem on what we can do. And I also wrote, oh, my heart is suffering already from this conversation. And what I really want to extrapolate here is to help people understand that people with chronic ailments, chronic illnesses, chronic disabilities that show up as chronic problems, they're not other than us. They are us. And I am amazed and already love what we're doing here to reduce the stigma. I keep looking up because I'm trying to, the words are finding me, to reduce the stigma that you and I have discussed about having, in quotation marks, a chronic condition, which is what people think of immunosuppressive disorder, et cetera,
Right.
disabilities.
You're trying to break down the whole us them situation, which is great because in a way we are in a similar boat, which is that we're both in a position that the other person can't understand, but we can. But I'm going to cancel that out. We can understand each other
Hmm.
um, because, in a way, people are working at cross purposes sometimes. They don't mean to. One person's trying to do their job and adhere to a policy. And I think we all assume that policies are good and right because they're the law or they're the rules. And we're all raised to believe that obedience is, you
The
know,
right.
right. It's how we grade ourselves. It's our work evaluations are based on our willingness. And
I
with
just need
that,
to I just need to say this out loud again. First of all, I just want to say that I read your book, Drawing Comfort for Chronic Conditions. I wrote in the notes, please, to people, go buy the book. And Evie will tag where you want them to buy the book. Because I had some friends with, one friend has a TBI that led to a
mm,
chronic pain condition. I have several women friends with chronic pain and whatnot. And so I was reading the book in that mindset. And then as I was reading the book, even though I didn't have what I considered to be a chronic condition, I didn't put myself in the same category. Then I called you. I'm like, what's happening here? Because I surely have mental health, right? I was diagnosed with anxiety and a bit of depression, and I have that in my background. And I used to have chronic worry. Chronic worry causes other chronic mental health and physical health
yes,
conditions. And then I had chronic frustration with the system and this and all these things that you're talking about. And so I realized this thing that you just said was breaking down the us them differences. And that it wasn't them, it was me too. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this monthly ongoing series conversation with you.
right. Because I think that the most toxic emotion there is shame. And when we can't do what we need to do, and to say I have the power to do this, but it's also uh, important that you are able to speak your truth and say what's true for me about what I can and cannot do. Um, and a lot of times it's a spiral down because there's something I put myself in we don't question the situation that we're in, we question ourselves.
Hmm. Mhm. So, we lost you for a second there, but I wrote down what you were saying. The most toxic emotion there is shame. And, when it's not recognized, well, actually, what you said was when we can't do what we need to do,
You and
we
I,
right.
no us and them.
Right, there's no us and
Yeah.
them, but then the person might feel ashamed. Now we go back to if I have a disability, right, an other ability
Hmm.
chronically, and I can't do something for myself, then I feel ashamed or shame. That's another thing I want to call out that I've learned so much from you, and that's why I keep invoking the word reverence about because you share kind of vulnerably with me how it feels to be able to do or not do something.
Hmm.
If you can't do something, it's not because you don't want to.
Right.
And then you were saying, I guess what I want us to do is help people open up to how it feels for others when they can't do something.
And I think, I'll say this, it's radical, but it's a thought that keeps coming to me, which is um, the thing that we are most ashamed of holds the key to our healing, because we are going to focus on wherever we have the most shame. Whatever, if you say to me, um, hey, Evie, I think your hair is too neat. That is not true for me, so I'm not going to, go down a rabbit hole about it. But if you say something that strikes a nerve, or if I fail at something that I have deep wounds about, then I'm going to get in a place of being stuck. And so we are, we don't know why we're stuck sometimes, but wherever you feel a lot of shame, there's something to heal.
Right. Now we're in a whole, horse of a different color conversation. Um, we're When we have shame, we focus on that shame, but we're here to talk about chronic conditions. And so I want to connect the dots that some people, I guess I'm wondering if maybe it's most people with chronic conditions, chronic illnesses, chronic disabilities, chronic other things, um, feel in shame, feel
Hmm.
ashamed
Absolutely.
if they can't do anything. So honestly, I just stopped talking because examples are coming up to me of my own circles
Hmm.
of people. I don't want to say anything about those specific things. I don't want to, um, say that, but I guess it just showed itself to me. I could start talking about three different people off the top of my head who
Hmm.
actually have that shame point around that thing that you just talked about where where we have that focus and they feel ashamed of that even though I'm like, what's that to be ashamed of?
I think it's when you're on the other end. I just spoke to a woman who's very powerful. She's over one of the chapters for an autoimmune disorder, and she was in a job where she was, you know, um, I'll just say that when she passed out, they clocked her out. They clocked her out before they called 911. I actually know two people who that happened to, and it was the same type of organization that they were working for. So, um, and that was, to be treated with that dignity. My daughter said, uh, when she was about 8 years old, she says, Mom, I think that uh, oppression is depression that comes from bias. Um, and so I think it's when people are treated without dignity, um, whether it's being pulled over by a police officer because you're a person of color,
Hmm.
everybody that is in a minority situation may feel like people wouldn't believe it unless they saw it happen. And there's a movie I really recommend everyone see. It's called Crip Camp, And even though this is about very visible disabilities, the whole disability movement is fascinating because one of the things that may happen is that you're not spoken to anymore with dignity because your status. We talk about marital status. We talk about health status. We talk about financial status for a reason. And so in this movie, there's a section where people are literally crawling out of their wheelchairs up steps of city halls to demand that the laws for disability be followed. Some of these people have needs where they are missing medicine, they're missing treatments, but they are uh, determined to be heard.
Mm.
And the government officials walk right past them as if they don't see them.
What was the name of this movie again?
It's called Crip Camp, and
CR.
CRIP Camp, and Judy Heumann is the was one of the founders of the disability movement. And interestingly enough, it was the Black Panthers who brought food to the people who were disabled, who were being not spoken to. So I uh, have never been treated with so little dignity as when I became disabled, and it was multiple. It was layers, family, employers, um, lawyers,
Well,
doctors.
that's another reason that we're having this conversation. When I interviewed you on the book show, my podcast, Your Book, My Time, I had already read your book and I wanted you to be on this show because I wanted to have this conversation. And right in that podcast, I'm like, oh, we're going to be talking about this in an ongoing way. This is ridiculous. I have a platform and I'm not the most famous. Whoever hears me and sees me and follows me will hear and see and listen to this, and that's good enough for me. It's like any person, we want people to just understand what it is we're talking about. And that's one of those things I learned from you, because you shared vulnerably with me, that shame feeling,
Mm-hmm.
that prejudice, that the
Prejudice.
status
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
prejudice, I guess that is a
it
correct
is the
word.
right word.
Right, the prejudice experience. And that's why I want people who have these all kinds of conditions, which now we know most of us have, to understand what we're talking about here. Honestly, Evie, at some point we're going to talk about addiction, because obviously this is a chronic condition, and obviously shame is involved, but not today because we didn't plan for that. But I really think that the message points that we're sharing here are so important. Now let's get to the tool. You told me when I said, "Hey, let's do this every month." You're like, "Okay, I'll show up." And then you said, I want to give people something to do
Mm.
every month. And so just earlier, we talked about one idea with the rocks. Did you want to share that one
Sure,
today?
why not? This is spontaneous, but a while ago, there's a book by Sun Bearer called The Medicine Wheel, and he is a Native American man who tries to make all those controversial Native American spirituality accessible to everyone. And he talks about doing a medicine wheel, where you can center on the four directions. You would definitely, if you do a medicine wheel, you'd need to look that up, where you face each direction. And there's wonderful meditations that go along with each direction. But it can be fun to paint some rocks and with the colors of the medicine wheel in mind as reminders, and maybe personal symbols that you want to put out there. And it can be fun to, and this was my friend's idea, to do the medicine wheel, but leave the rocks in nature for someone else to find at the perfect
Mm,
time.
mm. That's fantastic. So the Medicine Wheel book, and I wrote down, create a medicine wheel yourself and use it. I wrote down, look it up, because you said look it up, honor
Mm-hmm.
and respect the tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can create it yourself. So one of the things that I've learned from Evie is she's an artist, and we talk all the time. I, in my own book, have a chapter called Windows to the Soul, and one of the windows to the soul is creativity that I talk about and write about
Mm.
and do in meditation. And so I love that you're offering a tool like this where people can honor a tradition, the medicine wheel tradition, and still use their own creativity, which is a soul connecting activity, and benefit. And then, further, if they want, they could leave the painted rocks out in nature for others to find, or you can collect them up and use them again. I really love this.
And it's amazing how creativity, we do have answers inside. We do have truths that we discount. Anytime if you stop and say to yourself, what is true for me? Often we are getting caught up in other people discounting our truth, uh, other people negating our dignity. But if we can stop and say, what is true for me? Creativity is a great way to get in touch with that. And we are given information all the time, whether you call it the Holy Spirit or the Holy Mystery, as many Native American tribes do, or whether you call it the universe. The Holy Mystery of love um, is available to all of us, always giving us messages, dreams, and signposts, which we need to rely on when we're getting inundated with the world.
Yeah. So we just have another minute or so, but I just want to say I got a big smile on my face when you said, and I wrote it down, stop and ask yourself, what is true for me? Because, well, it's over there now, but just this morning I was writing a letter to my daughter, and I wrote about one of the seminal questions that I've asked myself on my own journey that had problems of a sort. And that is, what is my truth?
Mm.
And so I love the idea that we would offer everyone the power to empower them, no matter what their condition is, to ask, what is true for me?
This, and I just want to acknowledge what you said about addiction, Susan, because I know it's been a part of your life, your family's. Well, I know you're vocal about it. So, and I just want to say that, one of the things that really struck me is the silence, the coercion to be silent about it. That is a chronic condition. That is something that people with chronic conditions have. You're in a situation, and I can't think of anything more painful than the stonewalling, and that we do it to ourselves. That we take on these rules and we don't even know we're doing it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that is, I'm writing down, expecting to be silent about something creates a chronic condition. In my work with women, I often I uncover things about child molestation or teenage rape that they've never shared with anyone, and they followed the rules of being silent about it, and that gets stuck big time down in you. And so there's a lot of areas of life. Another thing that happens is children are told to keep a secret by one parent, or somebody in power, and don't tell anyone, and that's expected to be silent. So yeah, that I completely concur
Be-
on that.
because it's communicating that something that happened to you, that part of your history makes you bad.
Mm,
It makes you bad, and you can't heal from, if you can't heal from what you can't speak about. If you can't speak about it, you can't heal from it. And there's so much I could say about that.
Yeah, I know. Actually, yesterday in my live, I talked about, I go live daily at 5 p.m. Eastern in the Confidence Zone. And yesterday I just talked about journaling. And and what I said was, sometimes you can't speak about things to other people, but you can still write about it in a journal, and that's one way of speaking
Mm.
about it. And I know, and that you're actually, when you write in a journal, you're speaking to your own soul. and releasing your soul constriction. And so, oh man, we could go on forever about this. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Evie. Where can people find you if they want to contact you personally?
You know what? I am going to encourage people to find me a couple ways. One is I'm on Facebook as Evie Lennon. Uh, there's not many of us. There's also a page I have called Chronic Valor, uh, which is about reverence and reverence for our situations and our allies. And that's one way to find me. And also, if you would like to order a book, you can just contact me directly, either through direct messaging at Chronic Valor, or also at my email, evielennon779 at gmail.com.
How do you spell valor? How do you spell valor?
Oh, Valor. Thank you,
O-R.
because in Britain,
Right.
they throw you in there.
Yeah, I know. That's why I asked. Okay, good. All right, Evie, we're
Thank you
done
so
for
much.
today. Absolutely. It's always my pleasure. Thank you for the energy you're bringing to the room, to the conversation, to the world. And, as always, I look forward to next month, third Friday. It's 3 p.m. Eastern.
Thank
All
you.
right, friend.
Amazing for me as well.
Yeah, take good care. I'll see you soon.
Bye.